Hello there. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time of day you are deciding to watch these videos. Welcome to week 6 of environmental science. This week we are looking into module 3.1 of your textbook, looking at evolution and extinction. So in previous lectures, we've looked through population community, ecology community, and all of those things. And now we're kind of diving a little bit further backwards almost into this idea of evolution and then extinction. So if you are in the spring 2024 class, you do indeed have an exam this week. So do be sure to have all of your information prepared for that. All of that information, all the details and everything are on Canvas. So let's get on to it. So first thing I want to do is make sure that we recall our past lesson of ecological succession. So we looked at the process of community change over time and the progressive replacement of species due to changing environmental conditions that existing species which can make it more habitable for other species to outcompete earlier inhabitants. Recall that your book goes into the Florida Everglades, and we kind of saw how you can have this really beautiful grassland area, and then it really makes a lot of nutrients into the soil, and then a seed drops down, and holy bananas, now we have trees, and then the trees shade out the grasses, and so things can change, right? And thus those changes are what make up the community. So perhaps you've heard of this idea of evolution, and so we're going to walk into this idea of how do populations change over time? How is it that a population just changes? How can it have so much genetic variation, between populations? How can traits in a population change over time? There can be different colorations, as we can see here, right? This little cute little mouse here. So a lighter color brown versus a darker color brown, or even in this maize, right? Or corn. We've had many, many different colors of maize. And what we eat now as corn is the typical sort of white or yellow corn. Oddly enough, we also have kind of two main types of corn in a sense here in America. We have our sweet corn, which is what we eat. And then we have corn, for cattle, which is not nearly as palatable. That was something that I learned growing up because my dad is a farmer, and my grandparents were farmers when they were alive, and we had all this corn, and I was so confused when I was a little kid. I was like, wait, hang on, we can't eat this corn. And I'm like, no, that's not the corn that you want to eat. This is corn that our cows out there want to eat. So I just always thought that was kind of funny. And then also within all of these changes, how can new species form, right? We have tons and tons of different types of species on our planet. So, kind of going into these ideas can help us explain all of this. And almost pretty much all of it actually can be explained via evolution and something called natural selection. So the definition of evolution are differences in gene frequencies within a population from one generation to the next generation. And what I have here, this picture, are the different types of finches in the Galapagos Islands. And, at this point, there's really nothing controversial with this idea. This is one of those theories that is pretty well proven. I shouldn't say, right, we shouldn't say proven in science, but it's pretty well suggested, and it's been tested thousands upon thousands of times. It's also, you can also relate that to like the theory of gravity, right? Gravity is still technically a theory, but it's something that, we're staying on this planet. So it's a pretty solid theory that we can, pretty much accept as truth. So not only can it easily be studied over thousands of years, as humans in a lab, we can study this in very, very simple populations that reproduce really quickly. An example of that would be something like bacteria. So this would be like sort of natural selection, but of course we also have evolution in terms of artificial selection, right? Like humans have gone through and intentionally worked to change plants as well as animals over time by breeding them to maximize the desired traits that human wants. Unfortunately, sometimes that can be to the creature's detriment, right? Thinking about this idea of dogs, maybe you've looked at, a pug walking down the street and you're like, oh my gosh, how did you go from a wolf to a freaking pug? But again, going back to the detriment, some people, wanted smaller dogs with a smushed face. They like that aesthetic, but unfortunately that can lead to genetic issues. Like pugs can't breathe very well. They have like a lot of sinus problems. Or French bulldogs, again, one of those like really cute dogs, but they actually can't reproduce naturally. There has to be artificial insemination in order for French bulldog puppies to exist. And you can think of tons of different ways in which folks have bred creatures to be more to our liking. One of our cats actually, Microphone, she is a Bombay cat, and she has also one of those kind of, not a super smooshed snoot, not like a flat face, but she does have enough of one where she does kind of snore every once in a while. It is very cute, but yes, it is a thing. So you may know this already, but we have to, if we're talking about evolution and natural selection, we have to bring up the human that decided to come up with this theory of natural selection. And really, this is just the mechanism by which evolution works, right? So this is the process for organisms that are best adapted to the environment, quote unquote, the fittest, survive to reproduce, which leave more offspring than the less well adapted individuals. So you've probably heard of the term survival of the fittest, pretty much the same idea. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the biggest or the strongest animals, right? It simply means that it's best adapted to their environment. Sometimes that could mean being small or really, really small, like those little mice that we saw in a few slides ago, or have a certain coloration that help them blend into their environment so they get eaten less often, or have a poisonous sort of skin to kill off predators. Like there's lots of different frogs in the Amazon rainforest, for example, that have poisonous skin that many creatures cannot eat. Does it mean that all creatures cannot eat them? No, some creatures have a stomach that is able to, digest that toxin. And again, all of these ideas came about thanks to our lovely friend here, Charles Darwin. I chose to do a younger picture of him because I think we always perhaps consider the picture of him older. When I looked up this picture, I was like, oh, hey, young Darwin. That's probably the good one to go with. So these were some of his observations when he studied in the Galapagos Islands in particular, of natural selection. So there was overproduction. That means the animal will make more young so that they can survive, or then will survive, right? An example of that would be like fish, right? They lay a ton of eggs. Or even spiders. I know that odd thing here, but hey, evolution provided spiders for us. So lots of spiders, a lot of them get killed. There's a lot of different variation, right? So offspring can also vary genetically. Consider perhaps if you have siblings, right? You vary between your siblings and yourself, even if you're a fraternal or paternal twins. There's also limitations to population growth, right? So environmental stresses like predation or limited resources can only allow for so many animals to live, thrive, and survive. There's a differential in reproductive success. So those that are best adapted to environmental stresses are most likely to reproduce, which would then, again, pass along those favorable genetic traits to the next generation. Then, let's see here. So different selective pressures in different environments can also, entire populations can change genetically to be better adapted to their environment, right? Genetic diversity within a population is vital for a population to survive, right? We need these differences. We need some that are, better apt to survive than others. Also, if you don't have this genetic diversity, can lessen the success of your species, basically, which is really kind of interesting. But yeah, you need genetic variation, so you can't just like constantly be incestuous. You need to kind of mix things up a little bit within a population. What you could consider looking at as well, and this is an example from your book, looking at beetles and, you know, kind of their original population, the next generation after that, and then the later generation. I just want you to look at and observe some of the differences that you see, right? So in the original population, look at the color variation. We don't really see size variation here, but color plays a big role. So then there's less dark ones, because if there's less dark beetles, then they're not reproducing, right? So you have less of the dark beetle variety, and then it just kind of, then the lighter or medium to lighter generations persist, and later generation, etc. So kind of a really interesting idea here. And I just wanted to lastly, for this particular video, re-emphasize this idea of artificial selection, right? So natural selection has done what it's done. It's produced kind of like our quote unquote baseline creatures in nature. But then as humans, we've gone farther and done artificial selection. And this has been going on for centuries, pretty much since humanity has been the great humanity that we are. This will range from fruits and vegetables that you eat. Fun factsies, bananas now do not at all taste like bananas like they did in the early 19th century, early 20th century, like early 1900s. So fun factsies, this was kind of a sidebar, but still rings true. If you've ever had banana candy, like banana hard candy, like banana nerds or like banana flavored stuff, and you're like, what in tarnation? That is not what a banana tastes like. That's actually what bananas used to taste like. So when these candies were being created, the scientists that were matching the flavors to make the candy flavor, that is the chemical makeup, and that is the flavor that they were going for. Isn't that wild? When I learned that, I was like, that is disgusting. I'm so glad that bananas taste way better now. But even things like wines, you can blend different wines together. You can clone and create different wine varieties, which is really fascinating. And again, going back to pets as well. If you have dogs or cats in your home, just look at them and be like, oh my gosh, you used to be a wild cat in Africa, or oh my gosh, you used to be a wolf, or like, you know, down the line. But you can also tell that they have like these intrinsic ideas, or like not ideas, but like intrinsic things within their body that they're like, oh yes, I used to be a wild animal. Just play with a cat for like 5 minutes and you'll be like, oh yes, absolutely. And often we've bred them to be able to reproduce, but there are some creatures who cannot reproduce. As I mentioned earlier, Frenchies can't reproduce on their own. But, you know, if you were like me and got caught up in Tiger King during the start of the pandemic, right, you probably saw some creatures called ligers, and any one of those other ones that have been genetically modified to, you know, breed with each other, like they force breeding, and then the result is not able to breed to make more. So kind of interesting. So both natural and artificial selection can help drive these evolutionary changes. So I encourage you, next time you kind of go out, about, and around, play around with someone's pets, or just kind of looking around at different trees or at the grocery store in the produce section, just consider how those things maybe came to be over really long evolutionary time periods. So that's it for this particular video. I hope you enjoyed watching, and thank you so much. Appreciate you.